Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. I'm Tom Keene, along with Paul Sweeney. Join us each day for insight from the best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. You can also watch the show live on YouTube. Visit the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube to see the show weekday mornings from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern from our global headquarters in New York City. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen, and always on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Terminal, and the Bloomberg Business app. One of the great things I do when I lecture is I talk about critical thinking skills. These are developed mostly by having a greater sense of correlations and interdependencies between different ideas. Holding the high ground on that from BNY, Geoffrey Yu joins us in studio, usually ensconced in London. Jeff, thrilled to have you in our studios this morning. Way too short. We could do an hour with you this morning.
Thanks so much.
Is the market ahead of the Fed? I've never seen such an ex post, ex ante jumble. Is this constructive for markets to have this communicative uncertainty?
Well, what's constructive for markets might not be as constructive for the Fed. I think there's a bit of a dissonance there. And the Fed's message, whatever it is, not to, so the Fed's priority, responsibility almost, is not to induce panic. And the market should not be goaded into thinking that it can actually drive the Fed in that direction. So I think that's where we need to draw the fine line tomorrow. But ultimately, if you ask me, is pricing a bit too assertive, a bit too erring on the side of a hard landing? Yes, it is, right? So we clearly would want to be on the other side of that for the time being, and the rest of the world is watching, right? Because in the past, if the US sneezes, the world catches a cold. But looking at how other central banks are behaving right now, I'm not so sure.
Jeffrey, I know I was in your shoes years ago. I know that your sales force is running you all around the United States this week, talking to clients. What's your number one message?
So number one message is, firstly, from my side of the pond, can a conversation on fiscal happen at some point? It's not like in Europe, the conversations on fiscal are taking place in earnest. And in fairness, it's not like Europe is setting a good example either. But that is the concern, because the US is the reserve asset at the end of the day. And the second side is going back to the hard landing conversation. How is the economy actually doing? How's business investment doing? How is how households behaving? I was in Texas yesterday.
There you go.
Yeah, it was my first time there.
Really?
Yeah, and as far as I could tell, again, just speaking from personal experience, clearly a lot going on. Investment, construction, taking advantage, of the state's natural resources in terms of land and the like. So clearly there. Whereas if you look at Europe, if you look at the investment intent going on there, you just highlighted some pulling of investment or lack of investment going through, so you can see a bit of a divergence. So that begs the question, if there's that much going on in the US right now, why is market pricing on hard landing?
Okay, I'm going to tear up here. I got Geoffrey Yu in Texas.
Yeah,
what do I do
with
that? Where do you go with that? Jeff Yu, what does it then say about productivity differentials? Trudeau's flat on his back after a disaster in Montreal. Germany's flat on its back, etc. So I got a labor dynamic, a capital guide dynamic. I got total factor productivity, whatever you want to call it. But how do you overlay productivity on the confidence to be in the markets?
US productivity, right? So if you just do a simple equation, nominal growth, so potential growth, of which productivity is the key factor, plus demographics, plus your inflation target is your terminal rate, right? Just for a bog standard central bank. US productivity justifies US exceptionalism. That's my message.
Okay, so Chad Jones is at Stanford. He flies over to your London School of Economics. He's got a piece of chalk in his hand. And the bottom line on productivity is America is different. Is it just because we don't believe in austerity with our multi-trillion-dollar budgets?
No, because America believes in its people. America has people, has the talent, and continues to attract that. That is the fundamental difference. Yes, there's a bit of a demographic argument there, but how it fosters productivity through innovation, that's a lesson Europe badly needs to learn. Look at the Office of Budget Responsibilities report. Based on their baseline scenario right now for UK productivity, and this is the power of compounding, right, has UK's debt to GDP ratio in 2075 at 270%. If you lower the productivity baseline by 1 percentage point, it goes to 650%. 50%. If you increase the productivity baseline by 1% and the baseline's 1.5, so to 2.5, which probably the US is not far from, then you can keep debt to GDP ratio below 100%. That's what the US has going for it right now.
I call this Stiglitz little g.
Yeah.
Stiglitz just screams about growth rate as being the key dynamic.
Jeffrey, what do you tell our good friends in Texas about Europe, Middle East, and Africa in terms of opportunities? What do you tell our friends in Dallas?
Well, Europe right now, it's I'm struggling to get my head around valuations in the currency and the exchange. In the currency and equity markets. I thought the ECB was hawkish last week, to be honest. And look at all the bad news in terms of data on the corporate level, on an aggregate level. Why are you still hawkish? And they can say, well, we don't have a growth mandate. We're different from the Fed. Fair enough, right? But then you should take a step back, look at Draghi's report, how he highlighted competitiveness issues and the like. That really is a message that he's trying to hammer home. Can Europe deal with it? So let's see. In terms of the UK, finally getting to some kind of political normalcy, I would say. But the budget up ahead, again, focusing on growth and productivity. Middle East, to be honest, that over the last few years has been the big change. It's what our clients have been highlighting, where the opportunity is. There is a plan there to boost things. Of course, oil prices very much in focus right now. Clients are looking for proxies, but medium, longer term capital flows in the Middle East clearly is benefiting.
Geoffrey Yu on China.
So a lot of clients asking about President Xi's comments last week. They will hit the growth target. Let's just look at simple mathematics, right? So if you look at the growth data for Q1 and Q2 and probably Q3 below the target on an annualized basis, then Q4 has to be strong. We cannot discount that, at this point. I think the one thing China, from an asset allocation basis, has going for it is investment relative to benchmark is quite low right now. I think at this point, especially commodities market, less so oil, but maybe industrial commodities, Aussie dollar, you cannot afford to discount the risk of a major boost in Q4. Yes, it's probably a tactical play rather than structural.
We're in the same camp. I don't editorialize folks, but I'm in the you camp on this. When the facts change, she's going to change. I'm sorry. It's the same old story going back to Cho and Lei. They can have a strategy, but would you suggest that Beijing will capitulate to realities, allowing FDI, allowing investment?
So the recent announcement, allowing foreign investment into healthcare into China, for example, that is a very large market. So you look at the demographics. The premier, ever since he's been appointed, has been stressing the need for FDI and the like, allowing visa-free travel to China for business person, that kind of facilitation. That message is there, but going back to mathematics, capitulation to mathematics, right? Especially if you believe in the growth target, you have to realize reality and accelerate everything.
Geoffrey Yu, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So he hasn't been here since 1784.
No.
That's what Bank of New York goes back to.
Yeah, I know. Number one Wall Street, best address on global Wall Street.
Geoffrey Yu, thank you so much. He is with BNY. This is what Bloomberg Surveillance is about, advancing the conversation, the quality of the debate today on economics, finance, investment, and all. The only reason it's here is because Texas is number one in the NCAA football ratings.
Yep.
Ed Hyman's having the best September he's ever had. Go get them Longhorns. Yeah. And you got the fighting Texas Aggies coming up here. Right. My father was at A&M, so College Station will do it to you here in a distance. Ed, you are here within your horrifically busy schedule to explain a shift. What did Julian, Emmanuel, and your team at EvercoreISI do to convince you to move to a economic outcome for Mr. Powell?
So I'm a data dog, as you know, and I'd been lugging around a recession forecast for about a year, and my kids were laughing at me. My wife was kidding me about it, and I couldn't take it. And the fourth quarter's coming up, more substantially. Fourth quarter's coming up in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be positive.
Yep.
So I have to change my forecast again to push it out. And anecdotal's coming in pretty strong. Unemployment claims, which is the best government data, has been strong. System's got a lot of liquidity in it, and money's not tight, as you know.
Yep.
And so I decided I should retreat to fight another day.
So if a recession is not in the imminent, future, what should the Fed do tomorrow, do you think?
I don't really care right now.
You don't really care, okay.
I mean, I don't care in the sense that if they don't do 50, I'll be shocked.
Okay.
Because I've been at this so long, and the Fed picks out somebody like Timorous to communicate, frankly, to me and you. This is not a situation where they're peddling their own view. And Timorous has said over and over the Fed is going to do 50. And if they don't do 50, I'm going to have to go back.
We got to stop. This is very important. Nick Timorous, outstanding with the Wall Street Journal, and Colby Smith at the FT. Full disclosure, Colby worked for Surveillance for years. We're really proud of what she's done at the FT. Okay.
Same thing.
Ed, this is really, really important. They've lost control of communication. Now, we had Arthur Burns smoke signals from his pipe. We had Greenspan with we're all on the same page, one line, and we're now where we are for everybody nationwide listening, worldwide listening. What's Ed Hyman's best communication model for our central bank?
Timorous, Nick Timorous.
You think they should be doing it through the media?
That's the way they do it.
I know, but what do you recommend we do to right this?
Not my game. Not my game.
Oh, come on. Should we be more fractious like the Bank of England?
We are what we are. The Bank of England, first the Bundesbank, they would actually try and mislead people.
Fair. I will give you the fair.
It would, oops, you cut and you said you were going to ease or tighten. And then Volcker was the close to the vest. And then Greenspan came in and introduced the transparency program, which we have today. But, it's going to happen tomorrow.
Right.
And 25 or 50, it's not a killer one way or the other.
So how do you think about this U.S. economy in the context of the global economy? We've heard about the U.S. exceptionalism. Is that something you buy into? Is it new, or is it?
It's not particularly new. I tend to, buy into that story, but there've been plenty of ink spilled on this that the U.S. really is an exceptional place.
Yep.
And compared to Europe, which is not a particularly high bar.
Right.
And then China, I've almost lost touch with China.
Well, let me go there. In your acclaimed note, folks, we protect the copyright of all our guests. To get Ed Hyman and Julian Emanuel's work, go to EvercoreISI. I'm sorry, the second derivative on China isn't pretty. You've got China M2, China bank loans, ugly, ugly, ugly. Do you have a faith that Beijing can clear the market almost in a Hayekian way? They can come in, say, we got this wrong, straighten it out, and rebuild FDI and investment?
Yes, but no, they're not doing it. And so every day, particularly the past 2 or 3 months, I thought they might come in any day and clear the boards. And I've waited and waited and waited. And we survey 21 companies that have sales in China. And that survey is 29 on a 0 to 100. It's been as high as 79. It's been really strong. And the U.S. survey equivalent is 48. So, 29 is really bad.
Yep. Yet you still see time and time again Elon Musk, Tim Cook making the pilgrimage to China because no matter what you say, it's still there. It's still big. The middle class presumably is. It's all the arguments that we've heard over the last 20 or 30 years are still true, but the government doesn't seem to be open, I guess, as it used to be.
I'm a big China fan.
Okay.
I'm on the board of the China Institute. I have many friends who are Chinese. I want to encourage U.S.-Chinese relations, but I'm at the end of my rope, and I'm not sure if I'll ever go back.
Wow. And is that simply a reflection of the political environment where
yes,
all you talk about is tariffs here, tariffs there, and then on the other side, President Xi, again,
I'm not sure.
back.
I'm not sure they'll let me come back.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Ed, we got to finish strong here. I mean, we got too much going on. The Dow up 100 points, now up 88 points. The University of Texas is one of the few schools on the planet that actually make money at sports. Football contributes, basketball contributes, baseball pops $6 million a year. Really? At the University of Texas.
Everything's bigger in Texas.
Where is your University of Texas right? I mean, it's. I've had the privilege of talking to Michael Dell about this. And it just seems like everything's moving in the right direction for the academics, the athletics of the University of Texas. What do you see there right now?
It's a great school. And you should see the truth, and the truth will set you free. Woo. On the tower of the University of Texas. It's just a school that does a great job for kids. And I'm proud to have gone there. Yeah. Academically, it's really good. The sports
it's really
are good
coming
too.
Together. Like, the only equivalent I can think of is Michigan, where they're really doing, their sports and, the head football coach is making 1/10 of what Ed Hyman's making. That's a problem. But the answer is they're it's like a real deal. Yep. Frankly, like Duke as well. Yep. Ed, generous of you to come in again.
My pleasure.
We wanted to get Julian Emmanuel, but he was too busy. So we got you instead.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Ed Hyman with EvercoreISI, with a view to move away from economic slowdown to someplace new. We will look for the data. A very important interview for all of America within the election and the distraction of domestic debate versus our foreign policy future. Joumanna Bercetche had a wonderful conversation with the Prime Minister of Iraq, Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, on the tensions of Iraq, Iran, and the Middle East. Let's listen.
Understanding of this relationship between Iraq and Iran is based on mutual interests and mutual respect. Iran is a neighboring country, and we share 1,400 kilometers, and it's in our interest to have a close relationship, especially that Iran has been supportive of the political process and our efforts in combating terrorism. Of course, Iraq is the only country in the region that has a special relationship between Iran and the United States, and we try through this positive characteristic to help in bringing opinions closer, and we are interested to have stability in the region, away from the Axis policy. We don't want the tense relationships and the stances of other countries of the world to impact the Iraqi situation. This is our diplomatic effort and movement in terms of our bilateral and regional ties.
The Prime Minister of Iraq, Mohammed Shia al-Sudani there, and the distinction always made within the Levant and over towards Persia is Shia versus Sunni, and it is unusual to have a Shia Prime Minister of Iraq as in Iran versus a Sunni heritage. Joumanna Bercetche joins us now from Dubai. Joumanna, most people across America this morning are unaware that there's a countable 500,000 who lost their lives in the Iraq-Iranian war of the 1980s. How does Iraq and Iran begin to communicate now?
It's such an interesting perspective that you bring in, Tom, and that is true. The war of the 80s, very historical war in the region that probably doesn't get a lot of airtime, but the situation today is very different. That you have to remember there are a couple of things that bind Iraq and Iran together. It's starting with religious binds, and you've got to think about the two holiest sites for Shia Islam. That's Najaf and Karbala. They both fall in Iraq, so that is always going to be the case, and that's always going to be that religious draw and that religious tie that brings them together. But increasingly, what we are seeing, especially in the last couple of years, is they've got politically a lot closer. I had the opportunity to speak with the prime minister over the course of the weekend, and it is worth noting that he does enjoy a parliamentary majority, but the reason he enjoys that parliamentary majority is because he's being given legitimacy by political groups that are closely supported and affiliated to Iran. And so it is very noteworthy that just in the last couple of years, Iraq has fostered much closer political relationships to Iran.
Right.
And one of the concerns in the region is that there are several non-state actors that are, again, operating within this so-called axis of resistance that have been carrying out attacks either on U.S. targets or Israeli targets.
With your leadership of the conversation in Dubai, how does Sunni Middle East react to a combined Shia Iran and Iraq? How does Saudi Arabia, how does UAE, Kuwait, the rest, out off, frankly, to the west to Morocco, how do they respond to this combination?
So the impression that I got from speaking to the prime minister is that they see themselves as somewhat of a mediator. Now, you will remember, again, this went under the radar, but there was somewhat of a mediation that took place between Saudi Arabia and Iran a couple of years ago. And everyone gave China the credit for hosting the talks between the two countries, but of course, one being Sunni and one being Shia. But in reality, it was Iraq operating behind the scenes, going in between the two. Now, you have to remember there's another link between Iraq and Saudi Arabia, and that is, of course, they're the second largest oil producer within OPEC. They're a very important member of OPEC. There's a lot of focus, obviously, within OPEC to support oil prices right now. And so Iraq is pitching itself as a country that can mediate between all countries in the Gulf, and also one that looks to enjoy bilateral security relationships with the U.S. once the full withdrawal of the coalition forces take place.
And to that end, Joumanna, in your interview with the Iraqi PM, he said that U.S. troops are no longer needed following a near defeat of ISIS. What's the latest on that relationship and the troop deployment?
Yeah, so you have to go back all the way to 2014. And remember, back then, ISIS was a very clear and present danger. At one point, ISIS forces were thought to have taken over about 1/3 of the landmass in Iraq and Syria. So 2014 was a very different situation, which meant you had the U.S. alongside coalition forces from all around the world deploy troops into Iraq to defeat the threat of ISIS. You fast forward to today, it's a decade later. And what the prime minister was telling me is ISIS is no longer a threat. It's no longer a threat to the state. Yes, there are a few commanders here and there hiding out, to use his language, in caves or in remote villages, but they don't have any political support. They don't have ISIS incubators, and therefore are much less of a risk. The same way they would look at drug smugglers is how they would view ISIS and the ISIS risk. And therefore, in his eyes, there's less of a justification for U.S. troops and U.S. advisors to remain on the ground. Now, he suggested that there have been ongoing discussions with the Biden administration and that an announcement would be coming soon, or at least that is his hope. But in their eyes, there's no need anymore to have that arrangement with the U.S. and with the coalition forces.
Joumanna, thank you so much. Leading our coverage in the Middle East, Horizons, on Bloomberg Television in Dubai, Joumanna Bercetche. Daily look at the front pages, Lisa Mateo Hour. Lisa, what do you have?
Okay, this is Bloomberg Business Week. You have to check this out in the terminal. It came out with its best business school rankings for 2024, 2025. And they look at the areas like compensation, learning, networking, entrepreneurship. Stanford took the top spot for the 6th year in a row. They scored in 4 of the 5 areas they look at. And then you round out the top 5. You have Chicago's Booth School. Then you have Northwestern's Kellogg, Dartmouth's Tuck, and then Virginia's Darden. So that kind of rounds out the whole top for you there.
And each of them different. Each of them different.
Yep. Yeah, and each of them different. And it also, what is interesting, too, in this list that you have to check out, it breaks down which industries are hiring and from which schools, too. So if you're looking out there, consulting hiring the most, and that's followed by financial, technology, healthcare, and consumer. So that's how they break it down, too. So.
Over in Europe, IMD, IESE Business, London Business School in Evercourey. Good morning to those in Italy, INSEAD as well.
Yep, great
with some honor there. Bloomberg Business Week with that, and it's all it is. It's a great list.
Yeah, always.
77 schools, and
Duke in number 12, obviously. Yeah. Underrated. They should have been in the top 10. I'll
of
talk
course.
To the powers.
I think the big, within the competition of this, Harvard's number 6.
Yeah.
Which I think would be the surprise within our work. Sloan, Carnegie Mellon, I'll get it. 3, 2, 1. Carnegie Mellon, MIT 9 and 10, Duke 12.
Yep.
And on we go. And
higher than Carolina, though. So
there it is. There, Sweeney.
That's
Sweeney
all you
will work
care
on
about.
That. Next, what do you got?
All right, we're keeping with education. This one I saw in the Associated Press. It stood out to me because it says students are reading fewer books in English class nowadays. So if you remember how many books
nuts.
we used to read,
Oh,
yes.
don't
So
get me
here's
going.
what the teachers are doing instead. They're focusing on select passages from the books instead of having kids read the entire book. They're given chapter summaries for every novel that they're assigned, so they sometimes go to that. They're playing the audio books. They're assigning fewer books, more quizzes, but they're saying there's a reason behind the
What's
madness.
the reason? Let me know.
The reason, shorter attention spans. Kids can't sit there and read an entire book.
Then you have to teach them the joy of getting to the back end of Tale of Two Cities.
Yep.
Yes. Pressure for standardized tests. They said it's another one.
Got that email the other day. Don't get me going.
Yeah. Oh, see, and then the sense of they say that short form content is going to prepare them for the digital world. So they need,
but not college.
Form.
That's the difference.
It's crazy.
Let's say they get into Duke. Sweeney was at Duke. It's Friday, and they go, okay, this is the reading this weekend.
Yeah.
Boom. You got to read it.
80 pages, 100 pages.
100 pages, and it's 2 different courses. You wake up, you try to get through it, and then you got to figure out what to do with the second book.
Yeah.
And they're not. I see it every day.
Yep.
You're upsetting me, Lisa. What do you got?
No, I got to get you going. That's why I do it. This one's interesting. DraftKings being sued by the MLB Players Union. They're using the names, images of their members without their permission. So this is a lawsuit filed in Philadelphia. So DraftKings, also Bet365, they're also involved. They've been using pictures of these professional players in marketing campaigns. The lawyer said that DraftKings and Bet365, they don't have to do that. They can offer the same type of bets in other sports without using the images. But it's, DraftKings has been expanding the offerings. Last month they acquired website SimpleBet, so it just goes to show you kind of like the different changes that are going on.
And Michael Barr had the story about the sports gaming in New Jersey hitting an all-time record. I mean, this is we're at the early innings of all this sports betting, and I don't know where it takes us, quite frankly.
Yeah. And yet casinos in New Jersey are down.
Right. Because you can do it. You can do so much of just from your phone, sitting on your couch.
But you have to link the ratings success right to betting.
Yeah, I think so.
I have to.
Yeah, I think that brings in the casual fan.
Sure.
Yeah. I agree. Right. Next, what do you got?
Okay, this is the last thing. A shift in home ownership in the U.S. More millionaires are choosing to rent instead of buy. They say it's just the lack of suitable homes. The Wall Street Journal, they analyzed some data, but the millionaires say they'd rather keep their money in cash in the stock market and other investments since home prices, transaction fees are so high. You have property taxes on the rise, and of course insurance premiums where you have those mega mansions on the cliffs, right by the water. So that's some of the reasons. But one guy said he has a 3-bedroom apartment, luxury Manhattan high-rise, $19,000 a month. That's what he'd rather do because he can't find a house.
Absolute sea change.
Yep.
Absolute sea change going on. I don't know what to make of it other than people look at it, and it doesn't work if you're not investing it somewhere else. It's a failed strategy if you're just renting to rent.
Right.
Dead on arrival.
Yep.
But if you're investing as well, everybody's story is different, but you do the math and go from there. Lisa Mateo, thank you for the newspapers. This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, bringing you the best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. You can also watch the show live on YouTube. Visit the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube to see the show weekday mornings from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern from our global headquarters in New York City. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen, and always on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Terminal, and the Bloomberg Business app.